Hello and welcome, I'm Alas Garjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. American and Chinese negotiators finished talks on Wednesday with little progress toward ending a trade war. The relations between the two countries have shaken the world's economic confidence and stability. U.S. President Donald Trump said he would impose an additional 10% tariff on $300 billion worth of Chinese goods starting September. To talk more about this and other international agenda, we welcome to our studio today Dmytro Yefremov, Chief Analyst of the Center for International Studies, Diplomatic Academy of Ukraine at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Hello and thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
So it looks like US-China trade talks ended with no deal, or at least the deal was not visible to us. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts?
I think it is too early to say that the conversation is finished yet. The negotiators continue their talk during maybe 12 or 13 rounds, and currently they have reached no agreement, and the views of both sides on these questions differs much. So
well, they want to continue talks in September, as far as I understand, after these new tariffs will be imposed.
Or before. It is not clear yet.
Well, the tariffs will be imposed since the 1st of September, so probably they will start.
It's the statement of the United States president.
But have there been any other outcomes of these negotiations, except of this Trump's decision to impose additional 10%?
There are a lot of outcomes. They change dramatically all the global situation. For example, the investment streams change their directions in the world. A lot of countries start to rethink their foreign strategies.
Could you be more specific on that?
Yes, for example, after this trade war has started, we can see that the level of the investment from China to the United States faltered dramatically, and China redirects, and Chinese companies also they redirect their investment towards European countries and other markets. The countries are looking like trying to separate their economic relations and start to compete globally.
That is true, but now what is the strategy of the United States? Because as far as I understood, the whole situation started that the U.S. could see the Chinese policy as a threat to the whole country, that Chinese businessmen and Chinese companies would buy America, would steal the intellectual property and some military technologies, and now if Chinese money are not being directed to the United States anymore,
currently, it is clear that it is not just a trade conflict or a conflict around investment streams and so on. It is a conflict about world leadership. And Americans view China as a global real competitor. So they took a leading position, and their current strategy is to decouple all the economic linkages, connections that make their economy dependent on Chinese economy. Donald Trump tries to force American corporations to withdraw their production facilities, to withdraw their investments from the Chinese regions and remove them to other parts, and preferably to the United States. This is the political, there is a political underground for this decision, as far as Donald Trump tries to use it as his
election campaign tool?
Yes, as his victory and his achievement during his presidency.
So then, well, there is still another year for this election campaign to run, and the talks are to continue in September. So we do know that the statement from the press secretary of the White House that the talks, in their opinion, in Shanghai were constructive. But what kind of future would you foresee?
It isn't already clear for now that Donald Trump is late with this agreement with China, because he wanted to get this final agreement, of course, on his preferences before the election campaign starts. But currently we see that it would not be reached, and on the other side we can see the Chinese strategy, which is in trying to make these consultations and discussions as much longer as possible, to make time longer and to wait maybe if there would be a change in the political leadership in the United States after these elections of 2020.
Okay, so the approaches are extremely different. But since you mentioned the final agreement, could you please tell us what could it be about? So what China's position could possibly satisfy Donald Trump and vice versa?
We can call China's position as shallow agreement. It would include only trade issues. For example, it would be aimed to lower the trade disbalance, deficit between trade between the United States and China. As you know, currently it is more than $350 billion. China would agree to make some government purchases of United States goods, especially agricultural export, and maybe also some additional manufacturing. Also, observers point out that China is ready to fix its currency and take responsibility not to devaluate it during some long-run period. Because United States accuses China that it manipulates with its currency, that makes uncompatible preferences towards Chinese producers all over the world. So China currently is ready to take these obligations, but for the United States it is not enough. United States wants China to change the whole model of its economic development. If we would look inside this model, we would see that the main role in it belongs to the state-owned enterprises. They are concentrated in different sectors of national economy, and they are coordinated by state-owned banks. These state-owned banks are super huge. Currently, the 4 of them are in the top 10 of the world's biggest banks. So they are very influential and very have a lot of potential. And they provide credits very often under very low interest rate for these government and state-owned enterprises. These state-owned enterprises then produce, buy technology and produce a lot of goods, especially consumer goods at the lower price, and then export these goods towards United States and other developed countries. This provides for the United States the ground.
But where do they get the technology? Are we talking about the intellectual property?
Yes, it is also the point of negotiations,
yes, of
and it is a difficult point because the United States tries to accuse China that it steals a lot of technological innovations from United States companies, and China denies these accusations and says that it has improved its scientific and innovation potential so highly that it has enough possibilities to acquire and to produce these innovations by themselves.
Well, yeah, because according to Chinese legislations, foreign companies cannot really exist in China. They have to form some kind of joint venues with the local company, probably, as you said, state-owned companies. So basically, that is the way that these state companies could get an access to their unique technologies that further they could use and implement on their own market and international market, and that's what the United States is talking about. But let's move on. So Trump, as far as I understood from his Twitter post, isn't satisfied. After the meeting, he complained that the Chinese government had not lived up to its trade promise. I have a quote. "We thought we had a deal with China 3 months ago, but sadly China decided to renegotiate the deal prior to signing Trump." And then he continues, more recently, China agreed to buy agriculture products from the U.S. in large quantities, but did not do so. So you mentioned agriculture. At the same time, as media says, Chinese side recently, during these recent talks, had confirmed its commitment to increase purchases of American agricultural products. So what is happening? Trump complains basically that there is no increase in this agricultural trade. Chinese side is reassuring its commitment to this position, and we are lost.
The main point here is that these agricultural purchases would not change the situation and disbalance dramatically. We can see that China imports from the United States of agricultural goods some like $15 billion. And the trade deficit is $350 billion. So if even China would increase 2 times its import of agricultural goods, it would not change the situation. For the United States, it is not enough. It would not change the situation. The situation could be really dramatically changed if the Chinese National Bank of China would reevaluate its currency and change its official exchange rate. Mm-hmm. Currently, it is not. It provides some preferences for exporters from China because the currency is a little bit devaluated in comparison with American dollar. So the value of dollar is much higher than Chinese renminbi. This could change the situation. And also, Americans insist on structural obligations towards China. Those are that you have mentioned. Intellectual property right, cyber theft, and the subsidies and preferential credits to the state-owned enterprises inside China.
And the last question, because we unfortunately ran out of time, what is the WTO position in all these cases?
I think that WTO would be the main victim of this trade conflict because positions of the states differ. United States insists that China uses WTO rules and possibilities to enforce its export, to promote its foreign economic expansion, and to acquire assets all over the world using these trade rules. China keeps the name of inside the WTO as developed country, not as developing country, not developed country, because it provides for China some additional reductions. China is interested in keeping the WTO functioning in a current mode, and United States insists that the system must be reformed and China's role inside the organization must be reviewed. So if they would not find consensus inside WTO, I think that this international organization would become low functionable.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is very interesting. But let's see how the situation is going to evolve. As far as I understand, the trade war develops every month, almost every month. There are some retaliatory measures. We do remember that in the end of June there was a halt in the trade war. Now it's resumed again. So let's see what happens in September if the talks are to take place. Thank you so much for your interesting comments, and thank you for being a guest today in our studio.
Pleasure to visit you.
Thank you. That was Dmytro Yefremov, Chief Analyst of the Center for International Studies, Diplomatic Academy of Ukraine at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay tuned for more with UATV.